In a shocking turn of events that has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and cast a pall over the once burgeoning relationship between the United Kingdom and Nigeria, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, found herself at the center of an international incident after being subjected to a brutal and humiliating public mockery at the hands of Nigeria's First Lady, Oluremi Adesina. The incident, which unfolded during a high-profile Commonwealth forum in Abuja, has left the former royal reeling, with sources close to Meghan describing her as absolutely devastated and in tears over the scathing remarks leveled against her by the Nigerian leader's wife. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, the tension began to escalate during a panel discussion focused on women's empowerment and gender equality, two causes that have been central to Meghan's philanthropic efforts in recent years. As the Duchess took to the stage to deliver her remarks, Mrs. Adesina, who was seated in the front row, could be seen whispering to her aides and shaking her head in apparent disdain. As Meghan's impassioned speech reached its crescendo, the First Lady's reactions became increasingly overt, with Mrs. Adesina reportedly letting out an audible snort of derision and muttering something under her breath in her native Yoruba tongue. The situation reached a boiling point, however, when Meghan concluded her remarks and opened the floor for questions from the audience. Without hesitation, Mrs. Adesina seized the opportunity, raising her hand and launching into a blistering critique that left the Duchess visibly shaken. "Your words are hollow, and your presence here is an insult to the true struggle of African women," the First Lady declared, her voice dripping with contempt. "You come from a place of privilege, a life of luxury and excess, and yet you dare to lecture us on empowerment and equality?" The First Lady's tirade only grew more intense from there, with Mrs. Adesina accusing Meghan of cultural appropriation, insensitivity, and a fundamental lack of understanding of the challenges faced by women in developing nations. "You parade around in your designer dresses and preach about feminism, but what do you truly know of the plight of women in my country?" she thundered. "Where were you when our daughters were being kidnapped and sold into slavery? Where was your empowerment when our sisters were being mutilated and subjugated by the patriarchy?" As the verbal onslaught continued, a visibly rattled Meghan could only look on in stunned silence, her eyes welling with tears as the First Lady's scathing words cut through the air like a knife. "You are a product of the very system that oppresses us, a beneficiary of the colonial mindset that has kept us subjugated for centuries," Mrs. Adesina declared, her voice reaching a fevered pitch. "Your presence here is an insult, a mockery of the real struggle that African women face every single day." As the First Lady's diatribe reached its climax, the auditorium descended into a tense, uncomfortable silence, with attendees looking on in a mixture of shock and disbelief. It was a moment that would forever be etched into the annals of diplomatic history, a public dressing down of epic proportions that left one of the world's most recognizable figures utterly humiliated on the global stage. In the aftermath of the incident, sources close to Meghan painted a picture of a woman utterly devastated by the First Lady's scathing remarks, with the Duchess retreating to her hotel suite in tears, inconsolable despite the efforts of her aides and advisors. "She's absolutely shattered, her confidence and self-belief completely shaken," confided a close friend of the Duchess. "Meghan has dedicated her life to advocating for women's rights and empowerment, and to be so brutally mocked and dismissed by another woman, particularly one in a position of power and influence, it's been utterly crushing." The fallout from the incident was swift and severe, with the British government scrambling to issue a formal apology to the Nigerian government and express its deep regret over the events that had transpired. However, within the halls of power in Abuja, there was little appetite for contrition, with Nigerian officials doubling down on their defense of the First Lady's actions and accusing the British of tone deafness and a failure to recognize the deep-seated resentments that still linger from the colonial era. The First Lady spoke the truth, a truth that the British establishment has long sought to ignore or downplay, declared a spokesman for the Nigerian government. Her words were a wake-up call, a reminder that the legacy of colonialism and exploitation still casts a long shadow over Africa, and that the struggles of our people cannot be co-opted or whitewashed by privileged voices from the West. As the diplomatic firestorm raged on, Meghan found herself at the center of a global media maelstrom, with pundits and commentators weighing in on the incident and offering a range of insights and opinions. For some, the First Lady's remarks were a necessary and long overdue reckoning, a forceful rejection of the perceived hypocrisy and cultural insensitivity that often accompanies Western efforts at empowerment in the developing world. Mrs. Adesita's words were harsh, but they spoke to a deeper truth that many in the West are unwilling to confront, opined Kenyan activist and author, Wangari Maathai. Too often, we see these high-profile figures swoop in, deliver their carefully crafted speeches, and then depart, leaving behind little in the way of substantive change or understanding. Others, however, decried the First Lady's actions as a gross violation of diplomatic protocol and a deeply personal attack on a woman who had dedicated her life to humanitarian causes. Regardless of one's political leanings or ideological beliefs, there is no excuse for subjecting another human being to that level of public humiliation and vitriol, remarked British commentator and royal biographer, Penny Junor. Meghan Markle may be a polarizing figure, but she is also a mother, a wife, and a woman who has poured her heart and soul into advocating for the voiceless and marginalized. As the fallout from the incident continued to reverberate across the globe, the question of how to mend the frayed diplomatic ties between the UK and Nigeria remained a thorny and delicate issue. Some called for a complete severing of relations, while others advocated for a measured, tempered response that acknowledged the deep-seated grievances that fueled the First Lady's outburst. Through it all, however, one thing remained clear: the events in Abuja had cast a long shadow over Meghan Markle's philanthropic efforts and her quest to establish herself as a global voice for women's empowerment. The wounds inflicted by the First Lady's scathing mockery would not heal easily, and the road ahead promised to be a long and arduous one. Meghan's entire public persona, her carefully cultivated image as a beacon of strength and resilience, it's all been shattered, lamented her close friend. She'll need to dig deep to find the inner resolve that has carried her through so many challenges, if she hopes to rebuild and move forward from this devastating blow. As the dust settles on this extraordinary diplomatic incident, the world watches with bated breath, waiting to see how the former royal will respond to this latest and perhaps most brutal setback. Will she emerge emboldened and defiant, her commitment to her causes only strengthened by the adversity she has faced? Or will the weight of the humiliation prove too much to bear, a crushing blow that forever alters the trajectory of her life and work? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the events in Abuja have served as a harsh reminder that the path to true empowerment and equality is paved with obstacles, setbacks, and moments of profound disillusionment. It is in those darkest hours, however, that the true mettle of a leader is forged, and the world waits with bated breath to see how Meghan Markle will rise to meet this latest, daunting challenge.